Good evening. I'm David Bloom, social studies teacher here at Niskayuna High School. Welcome to the 4th annual Evening in History. Our program tonight is a commemoration of the year 1927. With the 1920s, that's the larger theme. Through historical speech and song, our goal is to educate, to acknowledge, to inspire, to reflect, and most of all, to tell a story of a time and place. Many thanks to the students, faculty, and staff who you've seen here this evening. I'd like to personally acknowledge the work of the always gracious Mr. Eric Hughes, jack of all trades and creator of the wonderful video you just watched, Mr. Brian O'Connor, the coolest jazz man I know, my good friend, Mr. David Fisk, Mrs. Maria Germain, Mr. Paul Marcelino. His students contributed the artwork, if you saw in the front when you walked in, the Cubist paintings, Mr. Mark Freeman. A special thanks to me, to my co-creator, collaborator, partner in crime, the Bonnie, to my Clyde, the amazing, irreplaceable Mrs. Christina Pizzino Catalano. Imagine a time when the world was changed forever by new technologies. New art forms and philosophies challenged the status quo. Sinister political movements were on the rise. When the people of the United States questioned the role of science and immigrants in our nation, and the people elected a businessman as president. The 1920s is often portrayed as the Roaring Twenties, a giddy party time inhabited by bootleggers, gangsters, flappers, and swells. Hopefully you saw some flappers here this evening. The list of names and events of just 1927 roll off the tongue. Charles Lindbergh, Al Capone, the murderer's row of the New York Yankees, the musical Showboat, the fight of the century. It was also the decade that saw the ascendancy of Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, and Joseph Stalin, and in America, a battle raged between the newly urban, 1920 being the first year in our census where more people checked the box for living in urban areas than rural areas, and the proudly rural, both sides digging in and standing up for their own values in the face of a great and horrific war, a changing world, a shifting economy, and an uncertain future. Tonight, we tell our story in a thematic way, understanding that our program is merely a small sample of the immensely larger picture. What better place to begin our program than New York City? Graydon Carter of Vanity Fair called New York City in the 1920s, quote, the big room. Jimmy Walker was the part-time mayor and full-time raconteur. Wall Street was booming, until it wasn't. Jazz and modern art were all the rage, and people were trying to get their heads around the latest theories of Freud and Einstein. It was the city that was teeming with immigrants, and African Americans were streaming in from the rural South. In this first section, you will hear from a future president of the United States, an unfortunately forgotten modern writer, a novelist who turned his own life into the legend and symbol of the age, the greatest mayor in the history of the city, chiming in on one of the most contentious issues of the day, and an account of the beginning of the end of the city's and nation's descent into the greatest economic depression of all time. Following these and ending this part of our program, musicals, present some of the most popular tunes of the decade. The popularity of Broadway at the time can be seen through the lens of 1927. Just choose one year. In that year alone, 250 shows debuted, 50 of which are musicals, and about 20 million people attended performances. That's about double what it is in modern times. As in past evenings in history, the music is in so many ways timeless.
Much has been said of late about good Americanism. It is right that it should have been said. And it is right that every chance should be seized to repeat the basic truths underlying our prosperity and our national existence itself. But it would be an unusual and much to be wished for thing if in the coming presentation of the issue of a new note of fairness and generosity could be struck. Littleness, meanness, falsehood, extreme partisanship. These are not in accord with the American spirit. I like to think that in this respect, we are moving forward. Let me be concrete. We have passed through a great war, an armed conflict which called forth every resource, every effort on the part of the whole population. The war was won by Democrats as well as Republicans. Men of all parties served in our armed forces. Men and women of all parties served the government at home. They strived honestly as Americans, not as mere partisans. Republicans and Democrats alike worked in administrative positions, raised liberty loans, administered food control, toiled in munitions plants, built ships. The war was brought to a successful conclusion by a glorious common effort, one which in the years to come will be a national pride. I feel very certain that our children will come to regard our participation as memorable for the broad honor and the honesty which marked it, for the absence of a fortunate scandal, and for the splendid unity of action which extended to every portion of the nation. It would therefore not only serve little purpose, but would confirm ill to our high standards if any person should, in the heat of political rivalry, seek to manufacture political advantage out of a nationally conducted struggle. We have seen things on too large of a scale at this stage to listen to trifles or to believe in the adequacy of trifling men. It is that same vision of the higher outlook of national and individual life which will, I am sure, lend us to demand that the men who represent us in the affairs of government shall be more than politicians, that they shall subordinate always the individual ambitions and the party advantage to the national good. In the long run, the true statements and the honestly forward-looking party will prevail.
Autumn Dusk in Central Park by Evelyn Scott. Featureless people glide with dim motion through a quivering blue silver. Boats merge with the bronze gold welters about their keels. The trees float upward in gray and green flames. Clouds, swans, boats, trees, all gliding up a hillside after some gray old women who lift their gaunt forms from falling shrouds of leaves. Thin-fingered twigs clutch darkly at nothing. Crackling skeletons shine along the smuttered horizon of Fifth Avenue. The hooded houses watch heavily with oily gold eyes.
For the next moment, perhaps you can close your eyes and imagine the splendor of the parties of the 1920s. There was music from my neighbor's house through the summer nights. In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. At high tide in the afternoon, I watched his guests diving from the tower of his raft or taking the sun from the hot sand of his beach while his two motorboats slit the sound, drawing aquaplanes over cataracts of foam. On weekends, his Rolls Royce became an omnibus, bearing parties to and from the city between 9 in the morning and long past midnight, while his station wagon scampered like a brisk yellow bug to meet all trains. And on Mondays, 8 servants, including an extra gardener, toiled all day with mops and scrubbing brushes and hammers and garden shears, repairing the ravages of the nights before. Every Friday, 5 crates of oranges and lemons arrived from a fruiter in New York. Every Monday, these same oranges and lemons left his back door in a pyramid of pulpless halves. There was a machine in his kitchen which could extract the juice of 200 oranges in half an hour if a little button was pressed 200 times by a butler's thumb. At least once a fortnight, a corps of caterers came down with several hundred feet of canvas and enough colored lights to make a Christmas tree of Gatsby's enormous garden. On buffet tables garnished with glistening hors d'oeuvre, spiced baked hams crowded against salads of harlequin designs and pastry pigs and turkeys bewitched to a dark gold. In the main hall, a bar with a real brass rail was set up and stocked with gins and liquors and cordials so long forgotten that most of his female guests were too young to know one from another. By 7 o'clock, the orchestra has arrived. No thin 5-piece affair, but a whole pit full of oboes and trombones and saxophones and viols and cornets and piccolos and low and high drums. The last swimmers have come in from the beach now and are dressing upstairs. The cars from New York are parked 5 deep in the drive, and already the halls and salons and verandas are gaudy with primary colors, and hair shorn in strange new ways and shawls beyond the dreams of Castile. The bar is in full swing, and floating rounds of cocktails permeates the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter and casual innuendo and introductions forgotten on the spot and enthusiastic meetings between women who never even knew each other's names.
It is impossible to tell whether prohibition is a good thing or a bad thing. It has never been enforced in this country. There may not be as much liquor in quantity consumed today as there was before prohibition, but there is just as much alcohol. At least 1 million quarts of liquor is consumed each day in the United States. In my opinion, such an enormous traffic in liquor could not be carried on without the knowledge, if not the connivance, of the officials entrusted with the enforcement of the law. I believe that the percentage of whiskey drinkers in the United States now is greater than in any other country of the world. Prohibition is responsible for that. At least $1 billion a year is lost to the national government and the several states and counties in excise taxes. The liquor traffic is going on just the same. This amount goes into the pockets of bootleggers and in the pockets of the public officials in shape of graft. I will concede that the saloon was odious, but now we have delicatessen stores, pool rooms, drug stores, millinery shops, private parlors, and over 57 other varieties of speakeasies selling liquor and flourishing. It is my calculation that at least $1 million a day is paid in graft and corruption to the federal, state, and local officers. Such a condition is not only intolerable, but it is demoralizing and dangerous to organized government. The Dries seemingly are afraid of the truth. Why not take inventory and ascertain the true conditions? Let us not leave it to the charge of an anti-prohibition organization or to any other private association. Let us have an official survey and let the American people know what is going on. A complete and honest and impartial survey would reveal incredible conditions, corruption, crime, and an organized system of illicit traffic such as the world has never seen.
Monday, Wall Street hummed with weekday activity. The great buildings were ablaze with lights all night as sleepy clerks fought desperately to get the accounts in shape for the Monday opening. Horrified brokers watched the selling orders accumulate. It wasn't a flood. It was a deluge. Everybody wanted to sell. The man with 5 shares and the man with 10,000. Evidently, the weekend barrage had not hit its mark. Monday was a rout for the baking pool, which was supposed to be on guard. If it did any net buying at all, which is doubtful, the market paid little attention. Leading stocks broke through the support levels as soon as trading started and kept sinking all day. Periodically, the news would circulate that the banks were about to turn the tide as they had done on Thursday. But it didn't happen. A certain cynicism developed in the boardrooms as the day wore on. Obviously, the big financial interests had abandoned the market to its fate, probably intending to pick up the fragments cheap when the wreck finally hit the bottom. "Very well," said the little man. "I shall do the same." That night, Wall Street lit up like a Christmas tree. Restaurants, barbershops, and speakeasies were open and doing a roaring business. Messenger boys and runners raced through the streets, whooping and singing at the top of their lungs. Slum children invaded the district to play with balls of ticker tape. Well-dressed gentlemen fell asleep in lunch counters. All the downtown hotels, rooming houses, even flop houses were full of financial employees who usually slept in the Bronx. It was probably Wall Street's worst night. Not only had the day been bad, but everybody, down to the youngest office boy, had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen tomorrow. The morning papers were black with the story of the Monday smash. Except for rather feeble hopes that the great banks would step into the gap, they had no heart for cheerful headlines. In the inside pages, however, the Sunshine Chorus reasons why the decline could not last. This was real panic. It was what the banks had prevented on Thursday and had slowed on Monday. Now, they were helpless. Reportedly, they were trying to force their associated corporations to toss their buying power into the whirlpool. But they were getting no results.
Cheer me upon my knee,
Just tea for two and two for tea.
just me for you and you for me alone. Nobody near us to see us or hear us.
No friends or relations on weekday vacation.
We won't have it known, dear, that's me on a telephone, dear.
Day will break and you'll awake and start to bake a sugar cake.
For me to take, for all the boys to see. We will raise a family.
A boy for you, a girl for me. Oh, can't you see how happy we would be?
Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and dad plants some is soon forgotten, but old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tow that barge and lift that bale. Get a little drunk and you land in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along.
I'm walking on the margin, for life is parting. Two lovers, I'm in the seventh heaven. There's more than seven, my heart discovers.
In this sweet, improbable, and unreal world, finding you has given me my ideal world.
Why do I love you? Why do you love me?
Why should there be two happy as we? Can you see the why or wherefore I should be the one you care